Hey, everybody. So, it's a good week. One of the reasons it's a good week, we talked about humor last week, and this week we're getting into, and we're going to actually see the play, right? We're going to see The Bald Soprano. I've got a video posted for you, and we're going to read it, right? And again, I want you to watch that video first, and then read second, because again, this is part one of Ionesco. We're going to be interrupting, right, with Jean Genet. In the meantime, because we've got the play coming up for Rhinoceros at the end of the semester that I do want you to go and see, but what we're talking about today is something that I think drove a lot of my interest in doing graduate work in the theater of the absurd. Right? There's a lot of the theater of the absurd that is interesting because of subject matter, because of what you can do with it, because of some of the things that we can, because of the atmospheres that are built right in the play. But I believe that plays like The Bald Soprano and The Lesson, often you will find both of them together in the same book, and if you do have one of those books that has both together, I highly recommend them both, right? But that set up the absurd in a way that is more what I suppose a lot of people expect the absurd to be, which is sort of odd, it's weird, it's nonsensical, it's kind of funny, but there's a menacing undercurrent to it, right? And there is, I think, a good reason for this. Again, we talked about humor last week, and about how humor is largely based in a couple of different things. The surprise that it creates when we have a sequence of words or a question response that we don't expect, or that are delightfully odd, or that play on words. Right? We talked about the fact that humor is hard to define, that we know it when we see it, but that the absurd might be easier to explain, right? That when something is nonsensical, when something doesn't make a lot of sense, when something does defy our expectations, and in sort of a madcap way, we're much more likely to say, oh, this is the absurd, because I think we associate the absurd with the funny more often than we do with despair. And in this class, clearly what we've learned is that the absurd is very based in despair. It can deal with humor. It can be something that is funny and fun, but that often there is a bit of terror and despair and depression and frustration. The Bald Soprano plays on all of these things, and is generally seen as a comedy, right? But it's important to explore what Estlin saw, right, in that PDF that we read. What did Estlin see that sort of makes the absurd, especially when it comes to Ionesco? And one of the things that Estlin talks about is this particular play, right? The Bald Soprano, which is one of the first that Ionesco puts out, and that sort of sets him on his course towards much more complex and unusual pieces, right? But that Estlin identifies this as an excellent example of what goes wrong with language that makes it into the absurd. So our scenario, right, our basic scenario for The Bald Soprano is that you've got two couples, Mr. and Mrs. Martin, Mr. and Mrs. Smith, and that they are meeting for a meal that maybe they've planned, that maybe they haven't. There's a fireman that comes in, there's a maid that happens to be there, there's a lot of nonsense, and at the very end, there is just an explosion of language that makes no sense, and we end the play and then restart it again with the idea that everything sort of repeats itself. And this is, again, right, your basic. The basics of this play are, again, does anything really happen? No, nothing really happens, right? You have conversation between one couple, The next couple enters, the couple sort of discusses, the couple that has entered discusses things with each other, and then finally, right, we get the two couples together, right, and the conversation, is very unusual, and we kind of get this sense of unease, and we get this sense of lack of communication, for lack of a better term, right? So what makes this into an interesting play? Well, I think as we watch it, as we read it, we start to question, what is it that makes communication communication? How do we communicate with each other? What does it mean to have a conversation? And I think this play illustrates what is so fragile about that. When we come back in the second video, we're going to talk about one of the reasons that I feel like this play is especially relevant for me as somebody who teaches language. And we're going to talk about how weird it is that language exists and that we have to use it. So, see you in a second.